Hello everyone, this is Tim McGee. I'm very excited that you all are with me tonight. I'm doing chapter 17, digital imaging and photography. Excited to learn about digital imaging. Let's go through a few slides here and learn what we can learn. We're going to go ahead and jump to that second slide, do a little introduction. The most popular visual medium of all communication technologies is digital imaging by quite a bit. Nearly every single person has some kind of device to capture images, and I can pretty much rest assured that everyone watching this video has some sort of device within arm's length or pretty close that they could grab to take images. Over 1.3 trillion images were taken last year alone, and as much as 80% of all photos taken were taken on a mobile phone. And mobile phones have transformed the landscape of imaging as we know it. We're going to go ahead and click to that next slide. A few stats here. Snapchat shares nearly 9,000 photos per second, 8,798. The WhatsApp, 700 million images are uploaded per day. Facebook, 350 million uploaded per day. And Instagram has 70 million uploaded per day. Digital images, they're malleable, they're traceable, which does cause some civil liberty issues, some surveillance tracking. Big Brother, he is watching you, and some scary stats. They no longer need our face to discern who we are, to track us. They can use body type, hairdo, beautiful bald head like this, clothing, a lot of different variables in that. We're just going to jump back into some background of imaging, and right here it says 1500s, but really a lot earlier this concept was developed. This pinhole camera where you could view an image, any kind of pinhole coming through on a reflective surface would put that image, would magnify it, reflect it in color upside down. And back around 1000 AD, Ibn al-Haytham was credited with this camera obscura method. It didn't take pictures, it just reflected what was being seen through the hole. And this technology was used to observe solar events, architectural drawings, tracing objects, many different things like that. We'll jump up into the 1800s and look at the daguerreotype camera, which is really the first permanent imaging camera that we have that we'll see. This particular type of camera took the first selfie as we know it and really transformed digital imaging. We'll go to 1840. We're going to see this first American patent issued to Alexander Wolcott. This is a beautiful box here. He engraved his name on it. He was pretty proud of this, and he should have been. We jump up to the 1850s, and we see panoramic technology being invented by Thomas Sutton, and a panoramic camera right here. Then we'll jump up one more time to the next slide and jump up to the 1880s. And we're going to see something that we may recognize, Kodak film. They started putting paper film out, and you'll see this little ad right here back in 1888 where you could get a Kodak camera with 100 pictures on it. And what they would do is you would take those 100 pictures, then you would send that film into Kodak. They would develop it and send it back to you. But pretty relatively cheap. This cost anywhere from $1 to $3, which in that day that money wasn't cheap, but still pretty relatively inexpensive that everybody could get one if they wanted. Next slide, we're going to jump to 1900, and we're going to see also that Mr. Eastman here was groundbreaking in that he marketed the first mass marketing camera. I mean, it went into production, and the Brownie just took off. You could get this one for about $1, so everyone could have one in their hands. They could start taking pictures. This particular model here was on sale till the 1960s, believe it or not. You could get a Brownie camera. Also in 1900s, you also had some more landscape photographers using the raised cameras. They take those out. This one looks pretty bulky here in the picture on this slide, but it really isn't. It's pretty lightweight, and they could fold it in and out so they could transport it pretty easy. Next slide, we're going to jump up to 1913, 1914, and we're going to see the first 35mm camera, also called the candid camera. Yeah, smile, you're on candid camera. This one was developed by Oscar Barnick in Germany, and later it became the standard for all film cameras. 35mm still used today. Next slide, we'll go to the 1940s, and we're going to see the first Polaroid, which we still have today, very popular. I still remember the first Polaroid I saw as a child. I was pretty amazed. This one here took about 1 minute to develop the image. You could just click it, develop it right there. You didn't have to send it in. Pretty big technology in the 1940s. Next slide, we're going to go to 1978. And look at the first autofocus camera. This one was the Konica C35AF, and again, you could just point and shoot, and it would take care of the rest. You didn't have to focus it in manually. Next slide, we're going to go to 1981, the Sony Mavica, which is a magnetic video camera. Basically is what that is, digital photography. Those images were put on a little mini disc and then put into a video reader, and those images could be displayed to a TV monitor or to a color printer to be printed out. Next slide, we're going to go to 1991. Kodak released the first professional digital camera system, the DCS, which was a great use for photojournalists in the day. Basically, it was a modified Nikon F3 camera with a 1.3 megapixel sensor, so very high quality, especially for 1991. Next slide, we're going to go to the mid-90s, and we're going to see this technology, this digital technology being put on the market for consumers, consumer level, not just photographers, where anyone could get that. You could just connect it with a series of cables and put it on the monitor, and you'd have that technology. Then we're going to jump to 2000, the big J phone, the very first phone with a camera on it. And Sharp put this out in Japan, the JSH04. Kind of just an afterthought. They threw this camera on there. Little did they know that it would transform the landscape of imaging as we know it, because pretty much every camera that you see today, or excuse me, every phone that you see today has a camera on it. Next slide, in 2005, we're going to see the Canon EOS 5D, the first consumer-priced full-frame digital SLR with a 24 by 36 millimeter CMOS. That's a complementary metal oxide semiconductor sensor. Pretty big words. Basically, it's a chip that you could stack those. Pretty inexpensive, still used in smartphones and tablets today. The next slide, we're going to go to 2007. We're going to see the modernization of the smartphones. And again, smartphone sales have taken off. They've gone up over 800% since this day in 2007, and I mean it's a worldwide phenomenon. Next slide, we're going to do a little comparison. Back in 1826, the very first photo taken. Took 8 hours to expose that. It was on a bitumen of Judea, which is like an asphalt. And it wasn't a permanent process. They also called it heliography because of sun and the photo in there. But it wasn't permanent, even though it's still on display today in a museum. I mean, they have to use digital imaging to kind of figure out what it was. But basically, it was just the outside of this guy's house. But it still revolutionized the photography as we know it. But it wasn't a permanent, so it didn't stick around. But today, in 2018, that same exposure that took 8 hours, we can do, I mean, a camera shutter speed is typically about 1/500th of a second. And on high-speed cameras, the shutter speeds are anywhere from 1/4000th to 1/8000th of a second. 8,000th. That's hard to say. Anyway, next slide. We're going to do a little more background. In 1839, we're going to see this first selfie. This beautiful image right here. It was credited to Louis de Guerre, but again, the photo was actually of Robert Cornelius. And Mr. Cornelius took the lens cap off, ran around to the front of the camera, and stood there for about 5 minutes. And it's beautiful. If it was today, he would be sending that on all kinds of social media apps. But pretty interesting that one of the first images was kind of like a selfie even then. But we're going to jump again, some progression of methods of capture imaging processes. Again, the daguerreotype method with Louis de Guerre, the calotype with William Talbot, the wet collodion, which was Frederick Archer, and a gelatin bromo dry plate. Again, the first dry imaging with Dr. Richard Maddox. And a little more modern, we've got the continuous tone panchromatic black and white, and the autochromatic color negative films, and of course the most modern and most popular, which is digital. Next slide, please. A little more history. In 1975, Kodak produced a prototype digital camera, had a resolution of 1/100th of a megapixel, and the size of a toaster. Not ideal if you're a photographer, if you know what I mean. And in 1990, the first digital still camera, which we did see, was introduced. It was called the Dicam. It captured monochromatic grayscale, had resolution pretty much lower than most cameras at the time, video cameras, and it cost about $1,000, which is not cheap, but it could hold 32 images on an internal chip. Next slide. DSCs, digital still cameras, and DSLRs, digital single lens reflex. They kind of work similar to traditional still cameras by the lens and shutter allowing light into the camera based upon the aperture or the hole and the exposure time. And they differ by the way the light reacts with an image sensor causing an electrical charge. And the sensor may be a CCD sensor, which is a charge coupled device, or a CMOS sensor, which we went over. And those CMOS sensors, CMOS, are still used in smartphones and tablets today. Relatively inexpensive. They don't use a lot of power. They're really a remarkable little sensor. Next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about pixels and photo sites. They only record light in shades of gray, not color. And in order to record these color images, each photo site is covered in a series of red, green, and blue filters. Each filter lets specific wavelengths of light pass through, blocking the rest of them. And they're also based on mathematical interpolations. Each pixel is assigned a color, very complicated formula, which I won't even put out there. And then when they're printed out, you got your YMC, the yellow, magenta, cyan, or the three primary colors being used there. And those colors can make up almost 17 million different color combinations. Next slide. The mobile phone explosion. Mobile phones being used as cameras. I pretty much guarantee everyone's taking pictures with their mobile phones. And again, Sharp just inadvertently introduced cameras to phones back then just to throw it out, and it changed the landscape as we know it. Again, over 1.3 trillion digital photos were taken in 2017 alone, and 75 to 80% of those were taken with a mobile phone. And this number right here, this is a staggering number that it's estimated that over 90% of human beings who have ever taken a picture, a photo at all, have done so with a camera phone. That just blows my mind. Not a standalone digital or traditional film-based camera, but a camera phone. Next slide. Talking about photo and video apps, you got 78,000 different mobile photo apps as of 2016, and that number continues to grow today. The combination apps with the photo and video are most popular. They make up about 29% of the market. Photo editors make up about 18% of the market. The newer phones are getting better cameras, putting the photo video apps in higher demand, as you know. Next slide, please. Going to talk about incremental digital imaging improvements. You got the autofocus pixels. They're kind of phase detection with stacked sensors. You also got increasing resolution capacity in the digital sensors. Full frame CMOS sensor with higher megapixels and resolution. And you got the advanced photo system type C sensor. It's got 250 megapixels. That wasn't even available to the public back in 2015 when they wrote this book. And you also have a gigapixel camera being developed in Chile. Yes, a gigapixel. That is just crazy. You also have dual lens technology being put into smartphones, which are making these smartphone cameras a lot better, a lot closer to the DSLR quality. You got one lens for color, one lens for brightness, and it's a dramatic quality improvement, as you guys will attest to with your phones. Next slide, we're going to talk about disruptive digital imaging improvements. You got the multi-aperture and enabling effects like background focus blur, parallax images, and 3D picture capture. They also capture data rather than images, and they process that data post-shutter release. And they have the ability to reinterpret the photo, focusing on any part of the image field. And that technology is just taken off, and it's crazy. And you've seen some of that 3D technology, I'm sure. Next slide. Computational photography or light field technology. A lot of wording in here. Hang with me. This includes the HDR, high dynamic range, digital panoramic, and light field cameras and technology. They produce images that are not a one-to-one ratio or record of light intensities, but they rather reconstruct what they get based on multiple imaging sources. They have optical digital imaging. It captures about 1/3 of the sensor's photosites, and 2/3 of that digital image is interpolated by the processor and converted from the RAW to the JPEG or the TIFF file. It's a pretty complicated process. And light captured by a lensless camera or a microscopic grate diffracting it through a glass sphere. You also have algorithms in the computer cameras that are coded to understand exactly how light passes through. So it decodes it, stitches it to the data, and makes a complete image with it. So really it's kind of manufactured. Next slide. This also allows the final image to be reinterpreted. It opens up a realm of possibilities and deception at the same time. It also replaces the camera obscura method, which was used for over 160 years, and it changes the way we use both analog and digital imaging capturing methods, and it makes digital imaging extremely flexible and easily integrated into apps and technologies, and very easily integrated to the future apps. Next slide. Social media. This is another form of disruptive innovation. It changes the reason that we take pictures. It's not just photographers documenting the news of the world, but rather amateurs. We are the photographers. All of us are. And we're posting it on social media, and it also makes it a lot less likely those images will ever be developed or printed off. And the digital environment connects people worldwide and places worldwide, image after image, and it's also in real time. I can do it today, this minute. I can do it live and put it up there. And these images can easily be modified for fun, vanity, or other reasons. And approximately 2 out of 3, believe it or not, pictures taken worldwide are thrown right on to some form of social media. Next slide. Some imaging capturing apps. You got combination apps, which we kind of talked about. You got combining computational imaging technology, functionality apps that are allowing connections to the original photo shoot and background information. You can get a lot of information off that. You also got things like the Google Cardboard app, which features the VR experience, virtual reality, captures digital images on a continuous 360-degree plane using an Android phone. Pretty cool stuff. Next slide. Couple data tables, and we're going to see that every 2 minutes the humans take more photos than ever existed in total 150 years ago. And also says that out of the 1.3 trillion images taken, again, 75 to 80% of that will be taken on a mobile phone. As you'll see, figure 17.3 says 79% in 2017. And these mobile phones and taking these pictures have become ubiquitous across the world. Everybody has them. Everybody's doing it. Everywhere you go, if you go on vacation, everybody's popping out the phone. Next slide. What to watch for in the future? Well, we can talk about Moore's Law, the 1965 law, where Gordon Moore talked about that every chip in the future will get denser, smaller, and costs will drop, and that those stats have held true. Will this law finally be broken? Also want to talk about what to watch for energy self-sufficient cameras, powered by the same light that produces the image. It's going to be powering the camera. Also auto detection clothing. Again, we talked about it a little bit, and Big Brother, algorithms, privacy issues. Those are all things to look for in the future. Next slide. Some career fields. You got photo editing, video editing, news photography, multimedia productions, video camera apps and development, freelance, and it's estimated about a 3% increase in the field of photography over the next decade. Not a lot, but 3%, we'll take it. Next slide with some questions for you. Question number 1, will film make a comeback? We see the vinyl records have kind of made a comeback a little bit. Not quite like they were in the early days, but people have started to buy those up again. Also, will the new algorithm to detect all this stuff cause another privacy law issue? Another question is, when this generation of children grow up, will they change the way that they document their children on social media? Will it have an effect? How does it impact their lives being documented online publicly every day? And also another question, with digital media so easily manipulated, will society become more apt to think that all media is fake media? Those are some questions to think about. And that last slide, if you do, are just my references. Hey, I appreciate you listening to this. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. God bless you. Have a great evening.